Good morning, Sacramento. Thanks for joining us during our weekly sojourn into the curious approach to the distillation of topical events. Ultimately, we are Ashton and Price here. We are a personal injury law firm, and we are also curious attorneys. So in our off time, what we do is we read the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, get on the internet, etc., and see if we can kind of pull out stories that on the face look like just regular stories, but kind of drill down to the legal issues. Because really, when you look at most of the issues that are topical, like Ted Cruz right now, and whether or not he is a natural-born or a naturalized U.S. citizen, or any of the other issues that are essentially pretty topical at this point, the foundation usually goes many times to the U.S. Constitution and otherwise to common law. And that's what we do in the show. So what we say, we're curious personal injury attorneys distilling topical events into their legal essence. I'm doing this morning by the great lawyer Tim Hodson with the sonorous, low, dulcet tones. Tim, thanks for joining us.
A lot of SAT words wrapped up in that introduction.
Sonorous.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Good to be back.
And as we say, this is Edward Shady. This is the one time you want a shady attorney on your side. Ed, with over 2 decades of experience, dozens and dozens of jury trials, was the lead attorney for 21st Century before he made the life-altering choice to come to what we consider to be the bright side and help the little guy against large corporations and personal injury cases. Ed Shady.
You got it. Thanks. Hey, you forgot 2 of our other favorite periodicals, The Economist and The New Yorker.
And also The Atlantic.
There you go.
And if you want to go liberal, Mother Jones. And if you want to go...
I don't want to.
All right. So today we have a bit of a theme, and it's kind of a theme of relocation. So we'll first talk about what are soon to be the Inglewood Rams and the Inglewood Chargers. They're probably going to call themselves L.A., but the stadium's going to be in Inglewood. And we'll talk about the rules regarding franchisor, franchisee. We'll talk about the Sherman Antitrust Act. We'll even get Al Davis involved because back in 1978, the L.A. Coliseum sued for antitrust. Al Davis joined, kind of changed the framework, and now the issues from a legal perspective as it pertains to relocation have been honed a bit as a result of Al Davis and that antitrust action that essentially started in the 70s and wound its way up through the 80s. We'll go ahead and talk about some more relocation because of the franchisor-franchisee issues pertaining to the Kings. And David Stern saying, hey, you can't move to Seattle even though you own the franchise. There are certain restrictions that are brought to bear based upon the fact that you belong essentially to a cartel, which is the NBA. And you can't move. And so now it has led to all this investment downtown. We've got the Board of Equalization maybe moving to 3rd and Capitol, which would be a multi-million-dollar investment and unbelievably great for downtown. It looks like 7th and L, the old Greyhound bus station, now be renovated. And all happens as a result of the legal issues that we'll revisit once again briefly and talk about that. It's another relocation. And then we'll talk about Spicoli and Shorty, or Sean Penn and El Chapo. Sean Penn may have inadvertently led to the arrest of purportedly the largest drug dealer in the history of the world. And he is about ready to be relocated through extradition. We'll talk about how that is an executive branch decision covered by the basically Loretta Lynch and the Justice Department. And it's not legislative. It's all done via treaty, which is through the executive branch. And we'll talk about how extradition works. And we'll talk about the countries that, if you ever wanted to flee the long arm of the law, the ones that do not recognize extradition.
Kuwait.
And Kuwait. I hear Bhutan is nice this time of year. If you speak a little bit of Nepalese, which I don't think El Chapo did.
Iran.
Yeah, Afghanistan. So the point is that we'll break down the law, and we'll kind of figure out why El Chapo really couldn't flee anywhere. Because looking at the list, I don't think there's anywhere in Latin America that actually doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. Believe it or not, even Cuba does. It's just that it hasn't been recognized. We haven't had diplomatic ties with them, but there is an extradition treaty that predated Castro. We'll talk about another relocation. Here's the thing. The Unruh Civil Rights Act controls what employers can do in regards to firing. And in California, it's employ at will. And as long as you don't fire somebody for an illegal reason like race, gender, age, etc., you can fire them for any reason. We got these 2 Einsteins at the Waffle House who decided, and they were in Arkansas, decided to wash their hair in some pots in the kitchen at the Waffle House and then, use Waffle House towels to, kind of tidy up a little bit with their new hairdo. And they got fired. So we'll talk about that relocation because they're on the way to Taco Bell. All right, and then we'll talk about dislocation. Reggie Bush is suing St. Louis Stadium Authority for what he considers the concrete ring of death. And if you don't know who Reggie Bush is, he's a running back for the 49ers. He made USC more famous. Ultimately, Pete Carroll had to go and take over the Seahawks as a result of what appeared to be Reggie Bush receiving lots and lots of benefits which were outside of the NCAA rules when he was at USC. And Carroll came out smelling like a rose, and Bush is suing the late St. Louis Stadium Authority for the concrete ring of death, which is, we'll talk about that in Assumption of the Risk. And we'll talk about now, the nice thing is we have the Student Succeeds Act, and Section 858 protects the rights of kids to walk or go out alone. So before, there were a lot of kids who were walking, they'd be picked up for being truant or saying, where are your parents? You can't walk by yourself. And we talked about, I was born in South Africa. And my dad would tell me when he was on the bus there in 1962, and he would see a sign that says, "Do not spit on the bus." And he said, "Why do you need a rule against that?" I mean, that seems pretty obvious. I don't know why we need a rule to say that children that are, 5, 6, 7, 8, if it's a safe neighborhood, why you would ever have law enforcement get involved unless there's some sort of distress, and why we need a rule to protect that. And Ed, you pointed that out to me. I mean, that's just that particular rule, it's a federal law.
Well, that's what bothers me so much about it. I think the federal government should seldom, if ever, you should come in contact with it. Maybe when you get your paycheck and you see the deduction, that's the only time you should see the federal government on a regular basis. But to have them legislating that it's okay for a parent to say, "Hey, my 10-year-old can walk home from school today," is ridiculous.
Well, the fact that you even need to be done is ridiculous. Some of the stories in that article about kids getting detained for 8 hours and their parents aren't able to talk to them, they don't know what's going on simply because they were walking to school. I mean, it's baffling that he even had to get to that point.
Yeah, no allegation to any nefarious acts by the kids either.
And the what kid showed the initiative. He missed the bus.
Yeah.
So this kid's dedicated. He's walking to school, and he gets detained.
It's amazing. That cop obviously was very bored. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Thank you, Uncle Sam.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was talking to Ed yesterday. I walked when I was in elementary school, would walk to school, and then when we moved, I walked to the bus stop. It was a long walk, and I walked to high school until I got a driver's license. I mean, I didn't even know that was an issue. It was a problem to be walking to and from
my
school.
neighborhood looked like a rabbit hutch in the morning. It's like every kid was walking to
We
school.
all walked, yeah.
From kindergarten on up. It's crazy.
And now almost everybody drives, but you can tell because we come down and do the show every Thursday. And when school's out, there's no traffic. So most kids are not taking the bus. I mean, it looks like most kids are being driven to school or driving themselves.
Yep.
I know. Yeah, that could be part of their physical education, just walking simply to school.
So let's go ahead and lay the foundation for what we're going to talk about after the break. We've got a Stan Kroenke, who is a billionaire real estate developer who owns the St. Louis Rams. And essentially, he and the Oakland Raiders and then also the San Diego Chargers, they all want to move. And so the NFL has a relocation committee, ultimately, and there are rules associated with that in regards to who gets to move and to where. So these rules are essentially laid down based upon the worry about antitrust, which is the Sherman Antitrust Act, which says, look, unfair competition is not healthy for commerce. And if you have a monopoly and you are basically have an unfair advantage, it's not based upon the fact that you're smarter, you just happen to have more money, you can push people out of the process, then the law is very protective of that and says you can't do it. So the NFL has come up with some new rules to ultimately kind of shield them from those type of lawsuits. And the odd coincidence is that the Raiders have been shut out again, and we'll talk about that. So there's a possibility that Mark Davis, Al Davis's son, who looks a lot like Jim Carrey's character in Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah. And
Nice haircut.
no, he's got the worst haircut alive, basically.
If you haven't, Google a picture of him, and it's just
Come on,
the
Mo.
The resemblance is striking.
Yeah, he's got
So,
the freckles. And
So he's been told by the NFL they've got a 1 in a million chance of moving to Inglewood. And he goes, so you say there's a chance. All right, so we'll come back. We'll talk about the legal issues associated with the NFL and the relocation. We'll do that after the break. This is All Things Legal, and I'm Craig Ashton. All right, so this is Craig Ashton. The show is All Things Legal on Money 105.5, the Wall Street Business Network. This is where curious personal injury attorneys distill topical events into their legal essence. So what does that mean? It means that we're curious, and beyond the superlative representation that we provide to our personal injury clients, and that's what we do. And this year in 2016 marks the 20th year of Ashton and Price. We started out, Chris Price and I, with an office in Roseville. Our secretary sat on the floor. We had a receptionist that was in an office complex, so it was a shared receptionist. And 20 years later, and thousands of clients that have entrusted us to walk them through the very complex personal injury maze. We now have 5 lawyers, over 100 years combined experience, over 12 staff. We have some rotating staff, so it fluctuates between 12 and 15, with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients. And ultimately, we're very thankful. So let me take this opportunity to thank all of the clients, past, current, and in the future, that have given us their trust to allow us to thrive in this environment. And basically, what we do is change people's lives. In my opinion, when I worked at Nordstrom, I could wrap a gift prettily. I could match a pocket square to a tie. But that was not a lasting impact that I would have in anybody's life.
Those are good life skills, though.
Unless, of course, because when you go mauve and you get a little bit of red in there, it's a very nice combination. But anyway, so the point is this, is that they come to us, they're injured, they don't have health insurance in many cases, they don't know where to get their car fixed. It's usually one of the most valuable assets. We get them to the right auto body shops. The auto body shops help them get a rental car. Then we get them to the very best medical care in the area. And the most rewarding thing that I've done, and I think you guys will agree, somebody comes to us and let's say they've got radiating pain into their foot, they can't feel their leg, they go to their primary care doctor, and to their credit, they just say, hey, let's wait and see, give them some Vicodin or some Norco and say, tell me if this helps. The people that we are lucky enough to interact with are slightly more proactive. If you read, Kobe Bryant hurts his shoulder, what's he get within an hour or two is an MRI. And it's not because he's suing somebody. He's not looking for legal advantage. He just wants to know what's wrong with him. So we found over time, based upon our anecdotal observation of the athletes who get the best care, and also based upon medical results that we've observed, that we have doctors that are very, very thorough, try to objectify the problem, identify it as soon as possible to treat it and fix it. And when somebody comes to us and they can't feel their leg, they can't work, they're miserable, they can't sleep, ultimately their marriages are strained in many cases, they get the right diagnostic tests, and some of them will go through a surgical procedure, and then all of a sudden they call us within a week and say, my pain is gone, I'm going back to work, thank you, you've changed my life. Then at that point, we can quantify the loss by getting all of their medical paid. We know they've reached the end of their medical journey, they've received the best medical result possible, get fairly compensated. And that is a super rewarding place to be when you can take somebody who is completely confused, disoriented, afraid, does not understand the process, and then we can shepherd them through it. So the only job that they have is to get better. Then ultimately we get them fairly compensated. And the more important thing is they get their life back, they get their family back, they get their smile back, they start becoming a productive citizen of California and the United States again, paying taxes, and they got their self-confidence back, and that is a life changed. And that's what we do at our office, and we're super thankful for that, and it's been 20 years. So thanks for helping me with that journey, guys.
You got it.
All right, so let's talk about what we're here to talk about, which is the Chargers, the Rams, and the Raiders wanted to relocate. And ultimately,
This sounds like the beginning of a joke.
and they wanted to relocate. They wanted to relocate to Inglewood. So basically, there were competing interests. I think there was one in Inglewood. There was another proposal for a stadium in Carson.
Correct.
And Inglewood won out. I think this guy bought the Hollywood.
Kroenke
park.
owns land there. Yeah.
And so he was smart. And essentially, the way the relocation process works is that you've got to get 2/3 of the 32 owners to approve it. And then really the interesting thing here, and it really stems back to the antitrust action that was filed by the Coliseum Commission against the NFL when the Raiders were basically precluded initially from moving to Los Angeles. So what happened is that the Coliseum Commission said, look, bottom line is we're not part of the NFL. This is going to bring a lot of business to L.A., to the Coliseum Commission. And you're saying that they can't relocate in a free society that's supposed to allow for free commerce, and we're saying that's a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And then at that point, the Raiders joined later, and a jury first was hung federal, then it came and found in favor of the Coliseum Commission.
Yep.
So then at that point, the question was, what are the damages? By that time, the Raiders had already moved, and then they were just kind of ferreting out. It took about a decade to come up with, I think, $18 million in damages when the court had to figure out, all right, look, they relocated, you've got an extra benefit here because now you got this extra revenue, so all the damages you presented probably aren't quantifiable, so we're going to basically lessen those damages. So now the way that the NFL works is that there's got to be a good faith discussion with the club and the stadium that they're in to make sure that the stadium, if they can accommodate the team, that the team stays. So that way that you avoid the stadium, which was a Coliseum Commission, not an NFL team, but the Coliseum Commission filing an antitrust action.
Correct.
And so in this case, in St. Louis, they had like a sweet deal where it was only $500,000, I think, a year for
Correct.
the lease. But there was a codicil in the clause with the stadium in St. Louis to say, hey, if you are not state of the art, which is a term of
not.
art, and it's subjective, right?
Very
but
subjective.
If you're not state of the art, we get to move. And they listed 12 factors, including the stadium's efforts and the economic situation of the team and markets. It also considers things like the team's footprint in the community. And ultimately, the St. Louis Rams and the owner said, I want to move. And the Chargers said same thing. And so so did the Raiders.
To the Raiders, correct.
So the NFL decided, and this is where the franchisee issues come into play, essentially said, look, we agree that the Chargers and the Rams would be a very good fit for Inglewood in Los Angeles because of the fan base from the Rams before, and the Chargers with the proximity to
San Diego.
Chargers San Diego to
yeah,
Inglewood.
Southern California is a giant metropolitan metroplex. You drive from L.A. to the border. The only place there's not a city is Camp Pendleton.
And there's a base.
So the way that you get to restrict the free movement of these teams is by the contract that the owners sign with the NFL, which is essentially like the same contract that a franchisee of a Taco Bell signs with PepsiCo or whoever.
It's Pepsi. Yeah.
PepsiCo or Yum Brands or whatever it is. So the point is that you can't start serving Big Macs at a Taco Bell. I mean, because there's certain parameters in the free exercise of commerce within the confines of the contract that you sign. So same thing here. So the NFL says, all right, fine. Oakland, you're out. You're staying. And wouldn't it be cool? I mean, there's some tangential talk about the Raiders moving to Sacramento in the stadium that they're purporting to build in the railroad yard for the soccer and make it a 52,000 seat stadium. And I guarantee you they would fill that place.
That'd be awesome, but that'd be also probably be the smallest stadium in the NFL. Most stadiums fit about 80,000. I don't see it happening at all. That'd be great. I don't see it happening. I think probably what's going to happen with the Raiders is they're going to end up sharing Levi Stadium for a little while with the Niners while they work out a stadium proposal somewhere. Because bottom line, and the NFL knows this, they can't stay in the Coliseum. The Coliseum is literally a dump. The sewage doesn't work. Animals get in. They interrupt the game. The seating.
Those are called fans.
No, yeah. For Raiders games, there's definitely fans.
They're
I mean,
crazy.
if you watch A's games at all, possums get in on the field. They're always breaking through raccoons, and the sewage backs up. I mean, the visitors' locker room in the baseball side of it in the Oakland Coliseum, 9 times out of 10, they're rushed out because the sewage backs up after games, and they got to get out of there. It's disgusting, and that's what's unfortunate is I think the NFL kind of stuck a little fork in the side of the Raiders because they've always been there. They've always been the nuisance. And it's like you left L.A. to come back to Oakland. You kind of buried your own grave with this, and you're going to kind of have to live with it for a little bit.
What would be kind of interesting, too, because being at the rail yard and bringing the Oakland fans in, you've got Amtrak that would just run them right in. Can you imagine being on that train after the game or coming in and out?
No, it'd be
Or the bar
fantastic,
car?
but I can't see why Mark Davis or any of the Raiders' brain trust would move into a 52,000-seat stadium or even let the NFL allow that small of a stadium. I mean, it's got to be 80,000 or minimum. I mean, it's just – because that's what the Coliseum fits. So why would they? I mean, it wouldn't make sense. It'd have to be a lot bigger of an ordeal. And I mean, it took heaven and earth to get the King Stadium built. I mean, I don't know what it would take to get an 80,000 seat stadium, but they do have the rights to do it. I think it's a 75-mile radius or something to that effect. And they can fudge it a little bit to 90 if they're able to work out the fan base. And the Raiders own the Sacramento part of the fan base, just like the Giants own San Jose, which is why the Oakland A's can't move to San Jose. So there's a lot of things that could work for the Raiders here, but it would be awesome. I mean, I'm not a Raiders fan at all, but it would be awesome if it worked out.
Yeah, you just need a stadium to
Yeah,
accommodate
which
it.
it's like I say, it was hard enough getting downtown built, the Golden One Center. So we'll see.
So the whole process with what's going on with the Inglewood Rams and the Inglewood Chargers at this point, being facetious, is the antitrust action that was brought by the Coliseum, which then caused the NFL to change their rules, which made the process incorporate a good faith discussion with the stadium before the team asked to be relocated. Then it has to be voted on by 2/3 of the owners. 30 out of 32 said Chargers and Rams can move. Raiders, you're out. which leads us to what's going on downtown. And the thing is now with what's going on in Inglewood is benefiting from what happened in Sacramento, because Darrell Steinberg came up with a streamlining of the California Environmental Quality Act, which essentially said if it's an infill project, and basically this is what it's going to be because this is Hollywood Park, there's already had development there,
Right.
then the rules can be streamlined in regards to the Environmental Quality Act. Now, when you think of the Environmental Quality Act, it's not the desert tortoise in most cases. It's about maintaining historical, basically flavor of the area.
Traffic.
It's also traffic. It's also
Pollution.
pedestrians. It's basically safety for basically people. It's more people than the spotted owl. And so what happened with Darrell Steinberg, streamlining this California Environmental Quality Act and infill projects is probably going to apply in Inglewood. So Sacramento basically is a pioneer of that.
It applied for Levi Stadium too. It helped them get that through.
And so basically what we have now is because of what happened with the Maloofs and the California Environmental Quality Act, we had some election law issues. We had the Fifth Amendment and the taking clause. And ultimately, we've got ourselves into franchise or franchisee, which is the same issues that we're dealing with in the NFL now. The things that are happening in downtown are all because of all those legal issues went in the favor of the Sacramento City Council and the people that were back in the arena. So now you've got potentially $1.5 billion in new state buildings being built. The Board of Equalization building is rife with problems. It's got leaking windows, it's got mold, etc. So they're thinking about perhaps moving to a building that's going to be built on that vacant lot at 3rd and Capitol, which would be a massive infrastructure uptick, and they're going to relocate. And we got the relocation of the Chargers and ultimately the Rams. And now we're looking at maybe the Greyhound building, $30 million investment to retool that, put in some restaurants, put in some parking. So the whole area downtown and now Inglewood is changing as a result of legal issues that have to do with franchise or franchisee, the taking clause of the Fifth Amendment, the streamlining of the California Environmental Quality Act, and a lot of this stuff, the precedent has been set in Sacramento.
It's awesome.
And it's great because it all started with one guy or two guys wanting to move a team to Seattle.
Yep.
And look at the benefit that is befalling Sacramento because of that.
All right, well, we got Margaritaville again. I think there's a message being sent to you, Ed,
No,
but
it's
you've
not.
got a deposition.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
Margaritaville.
Oh, no, what is this?
Brown-eyed girl.
Brown-eyed girl,
Brown-eyed
sorry.
girl. No,
I
I
got
want to
that.
give a shout out to the brewery, man. It was our 4th anniversary
Okay,
last night.
we're taking a break. Ed, you're out.
Yeah.
Have a good deposition. We'll see you after the break. All right, here we go. That's a perfect song for the transition we're about ready to make. This is Craig Ashton, Money 105.5. The show is All Things Legal. We are personal injury attorneys by trade, but essentially what we say is we distill topical events into their legal essence, and we do that because we're curious. Edward Shady, and he's an integral part of the attorney structure at Ashton and Price. He's off to do a deposition, so we're losing the sarcastic intellectualism of Edward Shady, and have a good deposition. All right, so essentially the song in the transition was Tequila, and the reason that's apropos is that we're about ready to talk about El Chapo. So Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who was and is still the head of the Sinaloa cartel, which is a cartel of drug dealers that are based in the state of Sinaloa in Mexico. And he was arrested on January 8th, I believe. And some people say that part of the reason he was arrested is that he agreed to meet with actress Kate Del Castillo, who is, I think, a novella actress in Mexico.
Correct.
And then Sean Penn, better known as Spicoli. so if you read the Rolling Stone article, I read it. Kind of interesting. A lot of very flowery prose by Sean Penn. So a lot of it, I don't know, it's kind of self-serving, overwritten prose, but some of it's very, very interesting. I mean, he flies into Mexico City. He ends up, I think, getting to Guadalajara, gets in a car for 7 hours, and then finally meets El Chapo. He describes the meeting with El Chapo where they're sitting around in the jungle with many of El Chapo's henchmen around because Kate Del Castillo is there. They're basically not all armored up. They're trying to make her feel comfortable. They gave her, I think, a cell phone that had to have a pink case on it because to basically aggrandize her feminism. And he doesn't drink, but he said, if you bring tequila or wine, I'll drink it, right? So Sean Penn says he's drinking tequila with El Chapo, and he's kind of opening up. He says El Chapo admits that he's the largest drug dealer of methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin in the world, etc. El Chapo's attorney says that didn't happen because that's the admission, basically. It's a declaration against interest and can be used against him. Hey, look, you said to Spicoli, Sean Penn, that you're the biggest drug dealer in the world, so you've admitted this. And his attorney said he didn't say that. Sean Penn needs to bring that information forward. Perhaps he's going to be a witness in the trial wherever he gets
I'm
extradited
sure he will
to.
be, yeah.
And so that's going to be an interesting issue as to what evidence Sean Penn has to back this up, and whether or not Sean Penn is exaggerating because he wanted to be the guy that got the exclusive interview with the largest drug dealer in the world.
Not that I know Sean Penn personally, but I don't think he would even need to go that far. Whatever he wrote about El Chapo would have been interesting, and it's quite possible a drug lord would boast about his victories and about how big of a drug lord he is. So I don't see that's too far-fetched, even if it's not true that El Chapo didn't say that. The funny part about the story is that this guy's on the lam, but yet he risks getting caught so he can text message an attractive female actress. It just goes to show you, no matter what, men are still stupid, man. I mean,
I know.
the guy, you got to be kidding me. The balls on this guy just to have that much bravado to still text a famous actress so he can meet her while he's on the lam is hey, it's straight out of a movie. You got to love it.
Well, yeah, because we talk about on the show, I think we did, Criminals on Tape or something.
Yeah.
Where, a guy basically stops traffic in Houston to
Propose.
Propose and videotapes it. And then guess what? He puts it on YouTube like an idiot. I mean, these people are committing crimes and then videotaping it and then putting it out for everybody to see, and then they get arrested. So who knows whether or not El Chapo ultimately made that mistake. But it goes to show you, tequila and common sense do not mix.
No, never. That should be a bumper sticker.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, so tequila. I used to say it makes me charming. I'm pretty much the only one who holds that opinion. So I think
plead the fifth.
El Chapo is learning the vagaries of our friend the agave. All right. So anyway, so El Chapo basically gets arrested, and he apparently didn't know who Sean Penn was, and so one of them had to reference 21 Grams, which was directed by Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, who is the director, got the Academy Award for Birdman. He did The Revenant this year. Seems like a pretty intelligent switch-on guy, one of the best directors in the world.
21 Grams is a great movie.
So El Chapo knew who Inarritu was and allowed Sean Penn to essentially attend this meeting. And then on January 8th, on last Friday, I think it was, he gets arrested. And now the issue becomes, because he is shown that he is unbelievably well-versed in escaping prison.
The same prison, by the way. I mean, that's...
Yeah,
if he does it once, you probably don't want to put him back in the same spot. Then they do it again.
I think approximately 14 years ago, he was about ready to be extradited. And just before he was to be extradited, he escaped.
Yep.
And then he was put in a maximum security prison and had a $1 million tunnel to his bathroom and was able to escape. So now the United States is very, very interested in getting him extradited. And so there is really a battle between Brooklyn and Miami, because there's many, many charges. In Brooklyn, there's murder charges. In Miami, it's really just drug trafficking. And the issue becomes what jurisdiction is going to actually get him if, in fact, he is extradited. Here's the way extradition works. Extradition essentially is a formal process which is based upon treaty. So it goes through the executive branch. So it's basically the State Department, President, et cetera. The Justice Department has nothing to do with the Senate or the House. It has to do everything with the executive branch. And countries will come to agreements in regards to what are extraditable crimes. Some countries will not extradite certain individuals to the United States because they don't have the death penalty. And Mexico, that's one of the reasons they were reluctant to send El Chapo the first time, not to mention that probably El Chapo bribed about 90% of everybody who was making decisions. But because of the death penalty, and because we have the death penalty and Mexico did not, they were reluctant to transfer him. So now, essentially, what we're looking at is whether or not they're going to surrender him, and it's going to take a while for them to get to the bottom of that. And then if it's not a treaty, sometimes you can do it with international comity, which is COMITY, which is cooperation. You can say, hey, look, we have a good relationship. We don't actually have an extradition treaty, but we do a lot of business with you. Perhaps, there might be Afghanistan, which we don't have a treaty with, say, look, we built a lot of your infrastructure. We really want this guy. At the very least, can you look the other way while the CIA comes in and
turn the other
takes him?
cheek?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
sometimes they trade. Sometimes they trade fugitives as well. That's happened sometimes.
And that happens. So there's a couple countries where we don't have any international relation. So no embassy, etc. Plus, we don't have an extradition treaty. One of them is Bhutan, which is considered to be the happiest place on earth. They do not measure gross domestic product; they measure gross domestic happiness. And ultimately, it is a country that is above Bangladesh and bordering, I think, China, and then also, I think, Nepal. I don't know what language they speak. I don't think El Chapo speaks Nepalese or Chinese or Hindi. So he would have stuck out like a sore thumb in Bhutan, I think. So, Afghanistan doesn't have an extradition treaty, Algeria, Cambodia.
Russia.
Indonesia. So, right now we've got, Russia doesn't, and that's what Edward Snowden's there.
Right.
And Russia could very easily turn him over, but, Putin's kind of sticking a finger in the eye of the United States by saying, hey, we've got him. He's basically harming your intelligence services by releasing information that's harmful to your country. And what's harmful to you is beneficial to us, so Snowden has a home here for at least a foreseeable future. So essentially, there are a lot of countries that don't have extradition treaties where you could have gone, but based upon the list, I don't see any in Latin or South America. And oddly enough, we even have a extradition treaty with Cuba.
Right, it just hasn't been honored since Castro took over. But yes, we do, and there's no there is no non-extradition treaty with Iran and North Korea either. But clearly, we don't even have any diplomatic relations with those countries, so it doesn't really matter. But the one that surprised me on the list was Saudi Arabia. Actually, we figure all the times we bailed them out and as much as we deal with them that we would have an extradition treaty with them, and we don't. Vietnam surprised me as well that we don't have extradition treaties with them either.
Well, I think Kazakhstan is very nice this time of year.
Yeah, no. I'm just going to try to stay out of trouble.
Yeah. Well, plus you're a extremely gifted criminal defense attorney, so
I could get myself out of it.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. So anyway, that's kind of how the extradition process works. So right now, it's high-level people in the State Department and the Justice Department dealing with high-level individuals in the executive branch in Mexico, trying to come up with a way to extradite El Chapo sooner rather than later. So the longer he's there, the more time they have to build a tunnel, or I don't know what else could maybe drone him out.
Right. I think this time Mexico doesn't have a choice. I mean, he's escaped from their clutches twice, and it's gotten so much publicity worldwide about his escape the second time that I think they're kind of forced to do it. And it looks like they want to do it. It's just, you're right, it's going to take some clever negotiation to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and Peña Nieto, who's the new president of Mexico, he doesn't want the embarrassment here.
No.
And the way this all started, there's a really good article in The Atlantic, right? In Mexico, they pretty much turned a blind eye to this because, there's a lot of money that's made, and it's spread out generously throughout, some of the higher echelons of Mexican politics and law enforcement.
Yeah, say law enforcement
and
too.
There was the Tijuana cartel. I think it was called the AFO, and there's four brothers that were running it. One was a doctor. Another one was the Michael Corleone, kind of, he's got I think he's got a law degree, business degree, kind of running the family business. And then a couple that were just ruthless, where they would take people, put them in a vat of acid and wait till they completely decompose, and then they would pour them down a drain, and the only thing that would be left would be their teeth. And these guys were ruthless. I mean, they were so ruthless in the Tijuana cartel that one of the wives of the cartel member heads was thought to be saying something. She was killed, and then they killed her mother and also her sister because they thought they were talking, and they did it without question. So what happened is that El Chapo was down in Sinaloa, so in southern part of Mexico, and they kind of were coexisting. And then what happened is that they went after El Chapo in Guadalajara. And El Chapo really tried to keep a low profile. He didn't want any part of obvious violence. And they opened up on El Chapo, and El Chapo was able to get into a taxi and get away. And they shot up a white Ford Marquis, I think. And it turned out El Chapo wasn't in it. It was a cardinal, a Mexican cardinal of the Catholic Church, and killed him. So at that point, any sympathy that you had when you kill a representative of the Catholic Church in Mexico, it's gone. Yeah. And then at that point, it was all guns ablazing towards getting these guys. The AFO, the Tijuana cartel, is either they're all in jail or dead. And then El Chapo now has been arrested, and it's not going to stop the drug trade. No way. I mean, it's just going to transfer to somebody else. But the whole reason that started is because these guys developed some hubris and decided instead of low-key and being businessmen to be gangsters and then end up killing a Catholic cardinal. And you do that, gloves are off.
All bets are off.
I think they killed a couple of American citizens, too, in that shootout. And then America said, United States says, look, this is it. It's affecting us. Game over. We're involved. And that's what's led us now to El Chapo and the extradition treaty, which is based upon treaties through the executive branch. And I think that's kind of interesting. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about, before we take the break, there's the Unruh Civil Rights Act in California, which is one of the greatest pieces of legislation, and we are on the forefront of these issues in California, where as an employer, you cannot discriminate, which means fire or discriminate, in any way in a working environment for anyone based upon sex, race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, age, disability, medical condition, marital status, or sexual orientation. And so employers are free to be stupid, however. So if you don't like the way somebody dresses, you can fire them. If you don't like the way somebody speaks, you can fire them. If you don't like their shoes, you can fire them. But you can't fire them for an illegal reason. So when we come back, we'll talk about these two Einsteins working at the Waffle House and treating the kitchen as their own private bathroom and how they got fired and how they are employees at will. And we'll do that after the break. This is Craig Ashton. The show is All Things Legal.
It's All Things Legal with Craig Ashton from the law firm of Ashton and Price on Money 105.5.
All right, we're back. If you're just joining us, this is Craig Ashton on the show All Things Legal on Money 105.5, the Wall Street Business Network. I'm joined by my colleague here, Tim Hodson.
Good to be here.
Great to have you, Tim. Essentially, I consider my voice to be, baritone, and because your voice is so much lower, I sound a bit like I'm on helium.
Sorry. I know you don't like people stepping on your toes, so taking away the glory.
There we go. Yeah, there's enough glory to go around. All right, so before we took the break, we were talking about some employees at the Waffle House. Now, let me just say this. This is in Arkansas. Nothing to do with the Waffle Houses in California. Waffle Houses, provide great waffles. I've never actually eaten there, but those who have told me that they enjoy them immensely.
Pancake Circus is a good place, man.
Pancake Circus?
Yep, good place.
So, bottom line, we're not casting aspersions on the Waffle House. We're just merely bringing this up because it's in the news, and there's a lot of legal issues that are attached to this that you really wouldn't think of. So the first is, let me just give you the story. The Waffle House says it's fired 2 employees at one of its Arkansas restaurants after video. So these guys know they're on video, right?
Everybody should know you're on video.
Yeah, pretty much. Even El Chapo was on
Yeah,
video.
I mean, you can't get away with anything anymore. Just stop doing it because
Yes.
you're going to be on video.
Stupidity will be recorded and possibly emanated to all of those that you don't want to see it.
Yep.
So beware. And the fact is that you're in a public place, so you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Nope.
Now, if you're in the bathroom or you're in your house and somebody's videotaping you, that is illegal. But videotaping somebody in a restaurant, public space, hey, they don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And it shows one of the employers dipping her hair into a pot of water in the restaurant kitchen, being assisted by, looks like the Waffle Meister. I don't know if that's what they call him.
You never know.
And she said he watched one employee dipping her hair into the water, pot on the stove in the restaurant's kitchen, then drying it with a towel. Robinson says he and his friend recorded the incident on their cell phones. And then they put it on social media. Like, whenever you're doing something illegal, stupid, and potentially civilly actionable, make sure you don't keep it to yourself. So
Narcissism.
she got fired, which she's an employee. If in California this happens, she's an employee at will. Stupidity is not a protected class, and you
Not
can
yet.
be fired. Yeah. So in California, the only everybody, unless you have a contract or you're a member of a union, and there's different rules. But bottom line, you're an employee at will. So the employer is free to make bad business decisions. And if they fire a perfectly great employee because they have some sort of subjective dislike of them that has nothing to do with gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, age, etc., you can fire them for whatever reason you like. So they got fired under those auspices in Arkansas, which is, bottom line, the same thing would apply in California, you're an employee at will. So the other interesting things are if they actually made this into batter,
Right.
and somebody ate it and got sick, guess what? That's not an assault, because an assault is the apprehension of imminent harmful or offensive contact. So just before somebody hits you, that's an assault. The battery is the actual touching. So in this particular case, if somebody ate this waffle as a result of them intentionally putting their hair into the batter and they got sick, I believe that would be a battery.
Absolutely.
And
It's
so
a harmful, offensive touching.
Yep,
Absolutely.
and it would be indirectly through the batter because of the hair, but that is harmful or offensive, clearly, unless, of course, you are into...
You could like that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a whole different show for a whole different bunch of guys. Right? So anyway, the point is that would be a battery, not an assault. It could be negligent hiring, because if there was a history of this sort of behavior and they didn't do anything about it, then you could extend that intentional act to the Waffle House to hold them responsible for the damages associated with your medical expense, your lost income, and your pain and suffering, which would be pretty minor if you throw up a couple times and you're better in a week. I mean, jury's not going to give you a lot of money, in my estimation. You can turn on Dancing with the Stars and see an individual unbelievably heroic, was in Iraq. He's a veteran, missing his, I think, left leg and right arm doing the cha-cha. So jury's not going to give you a lot of money for throwing up once as a result of tainted waffle batter. But nonetheless, it would still meet the elements of negligent hiring, which then would allow you to hold the employer responsible. But clearly a battery. So a battery as a result of the batter.
Har. No, I agree with you. I mean, it's clearly there's both criminal and civil aspects to this. This would be a good law school question. Anytime a story like this pops up, the first thing I think of is the bar or law school, because there's a lot of avenues you could go. You would definitely, like you said, it's not assault because there's no apprehension there. But yeah, there's vicarious liability here. I mean, there's employment law. This runs the gamut just for one little 2-paragraph story in the paper.
Yeah, intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Yep, negligent infliction of emotional distress vicariously through the restaurant. And then the effects of it going globally, you could have the Waffle House is that probably going to lose money over this.
The Waffle House, they could probably sue the
employer
employee for essentially calling into question reputation, perhaps affecting their bottom line.
But odds are you're going to that lawsuit would be about as what it's worth on paper. But you could do it. I mean,
this person's going to be judgment proof. Anybody who's got the intellectual acumen to wash their hair on the job in the restaurant at the Waffle House on video and determine that it would be a good idea to put it on the internet, I guarantee you their assets are probably limited to their Xbox and perhaps a half liter of Mountain Dew.
Maybe some Pop-Tarts.
Right, some Pop-Tarts.
Sounds like Doug's desk, actually.
Yeah, so anyway, one of the issues in the practice of civil law, which we do, is that you don't get an apology, you don't get a magic wand, you get money damages. And so one of the issues you always have to take into account is whether or not the individual who clearly has violated your civil rights, either from an intentional tort or the act of negligence, has the ability to compensate you. And insurance companies perform a super valuable service. They want to keep their money, but without them, our civil system doesn't exist.
Correct.
And we disagree with them. We battle with them constantly. Right now, we probably have about 100 cases in litigation against the largest insurance companies in the country. Probably 15 or 20 of those are moving towards trial as we speak. But at the end of the day, without the insurance companies, our civil system ability to be compensated doesn't exist. So it is a necessary part of the process. And this particular Einstein in the kitchen doesn't have any money. So even if Waffle House sued them, it would basically be a Pyrrhic victory. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Reggie Bush. If you don't know him, this guy was dating another one of the intellectual Einsteins, Kim Kardashian, and moved on from her to his credit. So he showed he actually has some taste. Played for USC under Pete Carroll. Was found to have I think his parents were living in a super nice house.
Escalade, they got
Escalade.
His parents got a few perks.
So clearly it was violation of NC2A rules. I think they had to forfeit.
Basically the Pete Carroll regime does not exist at USC.
Right.
The national championships, the records, the wins, it's like a blank part of their history.
So Reggie Bush was playing for the Niners. He's out for the season. He was at the St. Louis Regional Convention and Sports Complex Authority. And he hurt his knee as a result of going out of bounds, and then there's a concrete barrier or concrete surface before the wall where the patrons or the fans are seated.
Correct. For some reason, the geniuses that run that, it's also known as the Edward Jones Dome, didn't put turf or some type of padding all across the field, and so many players, Josh McNown also got hurt there this year. If your momentum carries you out of bounds and you can't immediately stop, you're going to kind of go into this concrete area, and concrete and cleats do not mix whatsoever if you've ever tried to do that. And they slipped, and Reggie Bush blew out his knee. And it's clear that this stadium has been put on notice that that's a dangerous condition. And if you're a public entity and you're on notice of a dangerous condition and you did not remedy it, that's not good.
Yeah, and the odd coincidence is this St. Louis Regional Convention and Sports Complex is no longer going to be housed by housing the Rams.
That
right?
is correct. Yeah.
So anyway, so basically, he would have a cause of action for workers' compensation because he was on the job.
Yep.
So that would be the first cause of action. Then what he's going to say is, look, it's not my employer only because I was on the job, so I'm entitled to those benefits, but it's a third party. So we always say, look, if you're working for Budweiser and you get rear-ended by a Coors Light truck, you have a work comp case with Budweiser, but also a cause of action for personal injury against Coors Light.
Correct.
So in this particular case, he has a workers' compensation, which will allow him medical care, prorated lost income within the confines of his rights through workers' compensation, but also a third-party case for negligence, dangerous condition, etc., with the defense being basically assumption of the risk. And usually in a sporting event, you are assuming the risk of injury, but he can argue, look, man, I'm risking concussion, I'm risking getting hit and hurting my knee, but not this. And he says this is the ring of death, and we'll see what happens. We'll keep you updated. But there we go. We went from relocation to more relocation to dislocation. So hopefully you enjoyed the show. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Good to be
Ed,
here.
enjoy your deposition. And you have a great rest of the week, Sacramento. And we'll be back same bat time, same bat channel next Thursday. And maybe we'll go ahead and talk about Every Student Succeeds Act, which allows kids to walk to school without being detained and waterboarded. All right, thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to the All Things Legal Show with your host, Craig Ashton, on 105.5 KSAC. For more information, go to ashtonandprice.com, see them on Facebook, or call 916-786-7787. Remember, for the best advice, don't think twice.